I sat at the head of the table, glass in hand, and watched my parents' eyes lock on me like they were daring me to flinch. During the New Year's toast, my mother raised her glass and declared, "Starting this year, you'll be financially responsible for your sister's situation. She's already dealing with enough." Her voice carried that mix of expectation and entitlement I had memorized over decades. My father added coldly, "And if you decide to refuse, don't expect to remain a part of this family." I let the words sink in, felt the weight of every unspoken accusation, every debt they'd already forced me to carry silently. Then I smiled, calm, deliberate. I tapped my glass once, slow, measured, and said, "Then let this be my final toast, and the last day you'll ever see any money from me." For a heartbeat, the room froze. Their shock was a quiet, perfect thing. I had given them no warning, only truth. I am Amina, 32, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the family's safety net, the one who fixes what breaks, pays what's overdue, and absorbs what others cannot handle. My parents never meant to be cruel. They were just blind to how much I carried, expecting my compliance as if it were a given. I have a younger sister, Layla, soft-spoken and fragile, or at least that is the role she has always been allowed to play. Every mistake, every minor oversight of hers, became mine to manage. Forgotten tuition payments, missed deadlines, bounced bills. I became the silent executor of their convenience, the one who ensured the family's image remained intact while my own needs quietly eroded. I have long lived with that invisible ledger in my head, the unbalanced weight of effort versus gratitude. I watched my parents heap praise on Layla for small gestures while my work, my sacrifices, passed unnoticed. It is not that I resented her. I resented the system that forced me to shoulder responsibility without acknowledgement. The years of subtle dismissal, the unasked favors, the gentle expectations. They shaped me, honed my patience, and refined my awareness. I learned to observe quietly, to calculate before I acted, and to carry my strength like a weapon wrapped in silk. As I sat at that table, glass in hand, I realized something crucial. Their perception of me as dependable was a trap. They expected obedience. They assumed compliance. But this year, I would act, not in anger, not in drama, but in quiet, deliberate precision. The room settled into a strange, brittle silence after my toast. My parents didn't speak at first, but their glances said everything, sharp edges hidden behind forced smiles. My mother's eyes flicked to my sister, full of the quiet expectation that I would bend again, that I would quietly handle it as always. My father cleared his throat, a deliberate pause that stretched like a taut wire. No words, yet the weight of judgment pressed down, thick and unrelenting. Every detail felt amplified. The slight clink of silverware, my sister's uncertain smile, the soft rustle of the napkin my mother adjusted as if to shield herself from me. It was subtle, almost polite, but the message was clear. My refusal had disrupted their carefully curated world. I noticed the hesitation in their voices when they finally spoke, the way my father's tone dipped just slightly, as if testing the boundaries of control. This was nothing new. Small betrayals had always built the scaffolding of my life, being handed responsibility for debts I did not owe, excused praise for accomplishments that were mine alone, whispered complaints about my rigid nature when I refused to be manipulated. Each incident had been a quiet tightening of a noose I barely noticed until now. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel it, the sting, the anger, and the clarity. They were testing me, assuming I would yield as I always had. But this time, I was already moving inside my own mind, tracing the path from observation to action, careful, precise, unhurried. They would not see it coming. I set my glass down slowly, feeling the cool weight of it anchor me to the moment. The chatter around the table dulled into background noise, and for the first time, I allowed myself to see the truth clearly. I had been complicit in my own subjugation. Years of fixing, of absorbing, of quietly erasing my own needs to maintain their comfort. It had built a life where I was invisible, except when they required me. The realization came quietly, like the turning of a key in a lock I hadn't noticed. I could continue as before, the obedient daughter, the caretaker, the invisible guarantor for my sister's mistakes. But that path led only to resentment, exhaustion, and endless cycles of expectation. Or, I could choose differently. Calmly, deliberately, I chose to act for myself. Not in anger, not with dramatic confrontation, but with calculated precision that could not be misread. In that instant, I felt a strange clarity. My parents' shocked silence, my sister's confused glance, even the polished edges of the crystal glasses, they all became markers in a moment I now owned. I would honor the contracts I had always followed in life, the debts I had paid, the responsibilities I had accepted, but I would no longer allow them to dictate my resources, my autonomy, or my dignity. This was the pivot, earned through decades of quiet observation and small indignities. The path forward was simple yet radical. Boundaries, transparency, and self-respect. I smiled again, inwardly this time, knowing that the first move of my silent, measured revenge had already begun. I did not storm out. I did not raise my voice. I finished my drink, wished them a polite new year, and went home to plan. That night, I opened my laptop and reviewed everything I had quietly built over the years. I work in corporate finance. Numbers, contracts, and obligations are not emotional to me, they are facts. And facts, unlike guilt, do not argue back. I started with documentation. Bank transfers, standing instructions, shared accounts, recurring payments I had set up temporarily years ago and never cancelled. Tuition support, rent supplements, medical expenses labeled as family emergencies. Each line item told the same story. I had been funding stability that was never mine to maintain. I created a clean ledger, separating legal obligations from emotional ones. There were none binding me to continue. Next came boundaries, written clearly and unemotionally. I drafted emails instead of messages, formal but respectful. I removed myself as an emergency contact where it was not appropriate. I spoke to my lawyer, not to escalate, but to confirm that silence and withdrawal were lawful and final. They were. The most important part was timing. Revenge, when rushed, exposes itself. Mine would unfold quietly, through systems already in place. No accusations. No announcements. Just the absence of what they had come to rely on. This was not punishment. It was correction. I was not taking anything from them, I was simply reclaiming what had always been mine: control, clarity, and the right to say no without explanation. The changes began the following week, unnoticed at first. Automatic payments failed silently. Tuition reminders went unanswered. A landlord's polite inquiry arrived, then another, sharper this time. I did nothing dramatic. I simply allowed the systems to behave exactly as they were designed to when support disappears. My phone remained face down on the table as messages stacked up. At first, they were casual, confused questions, gentle assumptions that something had gone wrong. Then the tone shifted. Pauses between texts shortened. Calls came late at night, then early in the morning. I listened to the vibration hum against the wood, steady and contained, like a pulse I no longer needed to respond to. When we finally spoke, I kept my voice even. I reminded them of my toast, calmly, without triumph. There was silence on the other end, followed by disbelief. They tried reasoning first, then guilt. I offered neither resistance nor comfort. I repeated my boundary once, clearly, and ended the call. What surprised me most was not their reaction, but my own. I felt no rush of victory, only relief. The quiet kind that settles into your bones when something long overdue finally ends. The consequences were unfolding, naturally, and for the first time, they belonged to the people who had created them. By the end of the month, the fallout had settled into predictable patterns. My parents stopped calling as often. When they did, their voices carried restraint, the careful politeness of people who had been denied the control they expected. My sister's messages became hesitant, tinged with frustration that her problems were no longer my responsibility. Neighbors and distant relatives noticed my absence from the family network. Invitations no longer arrived, or came addressed formally, without expectation. I realized then that respect, not proximity, was what I had been missing. Quietly, without confrontation, I had redrawn the boundaries around my life. The financial relief was immediate, yes, but the true payoff was far subtler. I reclaimed my time, my energy, my sense of self-worth. I no longer measured my value by how much I could rescue others. In every interaction afterward, I felt the soft but undeniable authority of someone who had acted with intelligence, not emotion, and allowed consequences to land naturally. Audience, consider this. Revenge does not require shouting, public spectacle, or malice. Smart, silent boundaries, enforced calmly, can recalibrate relationships, restore respect, and deliver satisfaction more profound than any dramatic confrontation. Sometimes the quietest acts echo the longest. Weeks turned into months, and the silence I had created settled into a rhythm. The chaos that had defined my relationships with my family no longer dictated my days. I learned to walk into my own home without tension tightening my chest, to plan my mornings without anticipating someone else's crisis. For the first time in years, I measured my life by my choices, not by what I was expected to fix. I reflected on the subtle power of restraint, the way intelligence, patience, and quiet consistency can shift dynamics more effectively than anger or drama ever could. My family had reacted, yes, but not because I yelled, pleaded, or shamed them. They had reacted because boundaries, once respected, cannot be ignored. Looking forward, I see a life defined by selective compassion and careful generosity. I will help, yes, but only when it aligns with respect, not obligation. I will love, but not at the cost of my own dignity. The lessons of this silent rebellion linger in every interaction, a reminder that standing firm can feel like both revolution and relief. I pour myself a cup of tea, watch the light settle across my living room, and for the first time, whisper to no one but myself, I am no one's backup plan anymore.